Ya vamos con la última parte de este tremendo video.
3 days later, August the 10th, Japan gained one of its most enduring and unquestionably most bizarre series of manga, JoJo no Kimyo na Boken. Better known as JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, debuted with its first volume titled Dio the Invader. Maiden is the key word here. This marked the beginning of the
Es increíble que JoJo sea algo que se haya creado el año 87, sabiendo que yo, que ubico mucho anime, recién lo vine a conocer hace menos de 10 años, 2017, por ahí. No lo he visto nunca, no es de mi gusto. Pero para que vean que uno no sabe nada. Uno no sabe nada, solo sé que nada sé.
Phantom Blood arc, the first of what would eventually become 9 distinct story arcs as of the making of this video, each starring a new protagonist of the Joestar family, whose first name somehow always shortens to, well, JoJo. That first arc takes place in a very bizarre version of late 19th century England, where Jonathan Joestar faces off against his adopted brother Dio, who's desperately trying to usurp the position of heir to the Joestar family. Yes, Jonathan Joestar is this dude's actual name, and yes, this series absolutely frickin' rules. 8 more story arcs, over 130 manga volumes, OVAs, a movie, multiple anime adaptations,
Es una versión hardcore del Hombre de la Máscara ayer.
and even some genuinely solid video games later, JoJo's is a certified classic. Its art style, storytelling, and endlessly memeable moments haven't just survived nearly 4 decades, they still feel fresh. May it never end. And speaking of JoJo's, you know who gets...
No te creo que... Bueno, sí, te creo. Que Michael Jackson se puso ese traje. Bueno, no creo que sea ya. Debe ser verdad, obviamente.
referenced a lot in that series? Michael frickin' Jackson. Wouldn't you know it, on September 9th, the King of Pop arrived in Japan as a solo artist for the very first time. He wasn't there for a relaxing holiday, of course. He was there for his first couple of dates of his legendary Bad Tour, which began with
Bien bad el videito, ¿no? El VHS.
a 14-day run across Japan. The first concert of the tour was about to take place just 3 days later at Korakuen Stadium in Tokyo. And Michael Jackson's arrival at Narita Airport was pure chaos. Over 300 reporters were...
Alguien que invente un filtro que ayude a recuperar este tipo de problemas con los que habían con los VHS. Yo creo que realmente lo va a convertir en algo increíble, o sea, una especie de estabilizador de este tipo de videos. Vamos a poder recuperar muchos videos viejos que tienen este problema.
were on hand, alongside massive crowds of fans who also hoped for a glimpse. You know, classic MJ stuff. Then, after 3 shows in Tokyo, the tour continued through Nishinomiya, Yokohama, and finally Osaka, where MJ also received the key to the city from Mayor Oshima Yasushi while sipping on locally grown green tea. Absolute baller move. Oh, and his monkey Bubbles was there too. Michael Jackson's monkey, that is, not the Osaka mayor's. You think? Beyond the spectacle, MJ also donated $20,000 to the family of Hagiwara Yoshiaki, a 5-year-old kidnapping victim, and also contributed personal items to charity auctions before leaving Japan. The Japan Lab...
Bueno, el otro americano que conozco que estuvo con un traje parecido es Tom Cruise. Muy distinto.
If the Bad Tour ended up drawing in 570,000 attendees, nearly 3 times the previous tour attendance record in Japan. Fans were happy, the media ate it up, charity benefited. Not a bad tour at all, despite what its name might imply.
にはダニアート、カーペットに畳に一吹き、
お部屋にダニアー
オタク
¿Qué fue eso? Por Dios.
Teenagers are building businesses with AI, while the only AI you know is ChatGPT.
Let's be real. Most people over 40 use ChatGPT like it's Google. Copy.
A not so bad, and honestly kind of underrated game console joined the party on October 30th. Not from Nintendo, not from Sega, but from NEC. Yeah, remember them? The console in question was of course the PC Engine, known overseas as the TurboGrafx 16, which, let's be real, is a way cooler name. Developed by Hudson Soft and manufactured by NEC, this was a
No logro reconocer NEC cuando le dicen N-A-C. N-E-C.
killer collaboration. Hudson Soft was riding high with hits like Bomberman, Adventure Island, and Star Soldier. NEC, meanwhile, was one of the world's largest semiconductor and PC manufacturers. The result? A compact powerhouse that Japanese gamers embraced immediately. The PC Engine boasted banger titles like Bonk's Revenge, Bomberman, frickin' R-Type. This thing handily outperformed Nintendo's Famicom in graphics and sound too. For a little while, it was the biggest threat to Nintendo's dominance in Japan. And not only was this thing kinda good, it was ahead of its time in many ways too. Because real magic came a year later when the PC Engine received the CD-ROM add-on. Yes, that's actually how you say it, becoming the first home console to ever use CDs as a storage.
¿Por qué ROM? Está en katakana también. Romu. ¿Por qué? Alguien que me explique.
Medium. Across its 7-year lifespan, nearly 700 games were released for the PC Engine. While it struggled in the US, never made it to Europe in a big way, it remains a landmark in gaming history. I think it deserved way better. Its 1987 release absolutely deserves its place as one of the most important pop culture moments of the year. And so does this. On November 1st, 1987, Formula One made its long-awaited return to Japan when Suzuka's circuit in Mie Prefecture hosted the 15th round of the season.
Suzuka.
It was the first Japanese Grand Prix since 1977, and kind of a weird one. During qualifying, Nigel Mansell suffered a heavy crash that forced him to withdraw from the race entirely. That withdrawal effectively handed his teammate Nelson Piquet his third and final World Championship before the actual race had even begun. The race itself, however, was still worth watching. The winner was my fellow Austrian Gerhard Berger in his Ferrari, finishing a comfortable 17 seconds ahead of a rising 27-year-old Ayrton Senna in a Lotus Honda. As for Japan's own, Senna's teammate, Nakajima Satoru, he rounded out a solid performance with a 6th place finish, just shy of the fairy tale result Honda founder Honda Soichiro might have dreamed of, what was after all his company's home circuit. But if the 1987 Japanese Grand Prix felt slightly underwhelming as a title decider, that would not be the case for what followed. Formula One returned to Suzuka almost exactly 1 year later in 1988, and this time, history was made. Ayrton Senna clinched his first ever World Championship title here, driving a McLaren powered by a Honda engine. One can only imagine Honda Soichiro-san going to bed that night with a very satisfied smile on his face. But then came 1989. Once again, the World Championship was decided at Suzuka. With the help of some hefty controversy, a collision handed the title to Prost in what remains one of the most infamous moments in Formula One history.
Sí. Ayrton Senna y Prost, si bien en un inicio se llevan bien, después se llevaron pésimo. De hecho, entiendo que Prost se tuvo que ir del equipo y mal. Creo que hay un reportaje por ahí de la vida de Ayrton y donde sale todo ese tipo de cosas.
Truly, lightning wouldn't strike twice in a row, would it? It did. In 1990, Suzuka hosted yet another championship decider. Once again, a collision between Senna and Prost settled the title, but this time in Senna's favor. Then, 1991, the story reached its emotional peak when Formula One returned to Suzuka for the 5th year in a row, and Ayrton Senna secured his 3rd and final World Championship title there. A perfect 1-2 finish for Honda on their home track. By this point, Suzuka wasn't just another race on the calendar, it was where championships were decided, where rivalries exploded, and where Ayrton Senna cemented his own legacy. Suzuka Circuit became one of Formula One's most sacred venues, a place that shaped the sport's history, defined an era, and forever tied Japan, Honda, and one of the greatest drivers of all time together. And it all began right here, with Formula One's return to Japan in 1987.
Nano Banana Pro is now on Artlist. Get Google's most up-to-date model and all the leading AI models.
On November 6th, Japan saw yet another end of an era in politics. Takeshita Noboru replaced his fellow Liberal Democratic Party heavyweight Nakazone Yasuhiro as Prime Minister of Japan. Those were some serious boots to fill. Nakazone had been the longest-serving Prime Minister of the 1980s, holding the office for a full 5 years, somewhat of a rarity in Japanese politics. Takeshita, on the other hand, his tenure would be considerably shorter. My man didn't even make it into the 1990s, because less than 2 years into his time as Prime Minister, he was forced to resign after being implicated in a massive recruit scandal. More on that in 1988, by the way. So what did Takeshita manage to do during his brief stint in office? Well, quite a bit, actually. In a speech to the National Diet, he publicly acknowledged that Japan had acted as an aggressor during World War II, a statement that, believe it or not, is a controversial one in this country. But what most people probably remember him for is the introduction of Japan's very first consumption tax, pushed through despite widespread public opposition. Make of that legacy what you will, but one thing is absolutely undeniable. Takeshita Noboru carried one of the greatest political nicknames of all time. The Last Shadow Shogun. And hey, he earned it too. The nickname reflected his immense behind-the-scenes influence within Japanese politics. Influence that didn't end with his resignation either. Takeshita remained a dominant power broker within the LDP until his death in 2000, and reportedly even masterminded the election of Prime Minister Mori Yoshihiro from his hospital bed. Love him or hate him, but the man was clearly very passionate.
O sea, si tiene ese apodo, Samurai en la sombra.
About pulling some strings. And for our final topic of 1987, how about a little fantasy? On December 18th, one of the best-selling video game franchises of all time made its humble debut in Japan. After the massive success of Dragon Quest a year prior, developer Squaresoft greenlit a project to create its own role-playing game. That could stand toe to...
Esto es cuando Square todavía no era parte de Enix, o al revés. Después se unieron. Pues tuvo súper buenos juegos Square.
Toe with Enix's hit. Leading the charge of this project was Sakaguchi Hironobu, who alongside just 6 other Square employees started work on a game that would ultimately change the company's fate and that of the Japanese gaming industry itself. They called it Final Fantasy. The story behind the game's title goes something like this. If this game failed, Sakaguchi was to leave the video game industry for good and return to university. He made his final attempt here. It was literally his Final Fantasy. Squaresoft too was supposedly on the brink of bankruptcy, staking everything on one last roll of the dice. It's a great story, but it's also not entirely true. Sakaguchi later stated that while times were rough and Square definitely needed a hit, the real reason for the name was far more mundane and actually kind of hilarious. He just really liked that abbreviation, FF. He had the fantasy part locked in and simply needed a word that sounded good in front of it. Final fit nicely, just like that, the name Final Fantasy was born.
Final
But
Fantasy.
name this, name that. What the people spending their hard-earned yen on a video game really cared about was, of course, quality. And Final Fantasy, though not perfect by modern JRPG standards, had a lot of it. Deep yet accessible gameplay that worked beautifully on a controller, stunning visuals driven by the unmistakable artwork of Amano Yoshitaka, and of course an unforgettable soundtrack composed by the legendary Uematsu Nobu.
Muy bueno. Famosísimo.
The game was successful enough to spawn a sequel the very next year, and from there, history took over. Within a decade, Final Fantasy had become the JRPG franchise to capture not just Japan, but the Western world as well.
Ese es Final Fantasy VII parece. Bueno, yo no me acuerdo. Jugué hace tantos años que...
Something that not even Dragon Quest ever fully managed, despite its massive domestic popularity.
7.
Today, with 16 mainline entries, countless spin-offs, remakes, re-releases, films, much more, and over 200 million copies sold worldwide, Final Fantasy stands as one of the most successful video game franchises of all time. Turns out that fantasy wasn't so final after all, huh? That, ladies
Principio del final.
and gentlemen, is all I have to babble about when it comes to Japan in 1987. But 1988 is, of course, waiting just around the corner. So again, consider subscribing if you haven't already to make sure you don't miss out on any future time travel sessions. And check out the Patreon if you
Suscríbanse al canal
We're
de
the most amazing, most supportive group of people you've
Aniki.
ever seen
Búsquenlo.
is waiting for
Muy
you
bueno.
to join them. Including
Esto sería
Hockey
hasta acá.
Gentleman,
Hoy día.
E-Fox, Saikajo,
Nos vemos.
Khalid Lepta,